All right, welcome to lesson 2. Today we're going to talk about bias in surveys. Lesson 1 we talked about collecting data, and we talked specifically about the 4 main things we can do with data. We can gather, we can organize, we can analyze, and we can present the data. We built some frequency tables which we converted into histograms. So that was mainly focused on the organizing, the analyzing, and the presentation of data. Today we're going to talk about bias and when you collect data, how you can make sure that it's accurate, that it's unbiased. I'll start with having you look at the web. If you go and you take a look at, it's a company called Ipsos Reid. It's Canadian. Here, I'll click on the link. And they're an independent market research company. And you can see they've got 6 areas of focus here. They are one of the world leaders in collecting data, and they try and do it as unbiased as possible. But unfortunately, sometimes bias happens. It's systematic in nature when it does happen. For the most part, it's usually unintentional, but that's what we're going to try and see if we can fix today. If you go to the county's website, so just Prince Edward County, you'll see that in the public notices you can take the development survey. So I just want to draw your attention to that survey. We'll be using it a little bit later on. The definition of the definition of bias is just that it favors certain outcomes or responses. Key thing here is it must be systematic in nature. So something's wrong with the system, whether it's the survey, whether it's the people conducting the survey, whether it's the people conducting the collection of the information. It's the system that's wrong. There's 4 types of bias: sampling, non-response, measurement, and response. Keep these in mind because at the end of this little mini lesson, you're going to go back to that survey that the county is doing and see if you can find different examples of bias within that survey. So let's do sampling bias. Real simple, it just happens when certain characteristics of the population are not reflected. So a good example is if you are in a school and the Arts Council, for example, wants to see whether or not extracurricular activities should be spent on musical instruments. Well, the bias there is that the Arts Council has a vested interest in that money going towards musical instruments, so the entire student population is not reflected if they only survey themselves. Next type of bias is non-response bias, so when certain groups are just underrepresented. So let's imagine that Students' Council is going to ask, I don't know, every 3rd, every 5th, every person, it wouldn't really matter, but in the senior cafeteria to answer a survey. So they do their survey, all the seniors say that they don't want more than 2 dances a year. Well, I think you can see that certain groups, specifically the junior grades, are underrepresented in that survey. They may have a different opinion, and that's bias, non-response bias, more specifically. Third type is measurement bias. So this is the data collection method that's flawed. So imagine the town of Picton, they want to gather some information on driver speeds. So they ask the OPP to set up radar guns on Highway 49 as people enter Picton. The problem there is that when you see an OPP officer, you immediately slow down. So all of that data coming back to the town of Picton is going to be biased because the measurement tool is not accurate. Another example would be if you are, let's say, a tailor and you are consistently using the same tape measure, and over time that tape measure gets stretched, gets faded. It won't give you correct measurement of the clothing that you're trying to ascertain. So measurement bias focuses on the collection method. And the last type is response bias, and this happens quite a bit, especially in schools, I think, where respondents just don't feel comfortable to answer, or they purposely give false answers. So you've been in classes where a teacher has taught a tough lesson. I use economics here as an example. Law of supply. At the end of the lesson, teacher asks, does everyone understand? If you don't understand, chances of you putting up your hand are pretty slim because you don't want to be centered out. So that's an example of response bias. Or you'll get instances where people just don't answer the questions truthfully. That's another example of response bias. There's a couple other factors that we've got to talk about, and we'll do this in class. Leading questions and loaded questions. One of the best spots to watch leading questions is if you turn on a Law and Order episode or something like that. You know, the prosecutor stands up, objection, Your Honor, leading question. That happens in the legal system. That also happens in surveys. So that, in a nutshell, is bias in surveys. What you're going to do now is go and look at the to-do list. You're going to go onto the county website. You're going to look at that survey. I would actually like you to do the survey, but you're looking for whether the survey has any of those 4 types of biases. And then if it does, go into the discussion group and post your findings. All right, thanks a lot. See you tomorrow.